The scholar's journal tells us he is suffering from a disease, and that disease is revealed to be aging, presumably given his mission some form of aging that is accelerated. But what does that actually mean in a game where what's ancient to one being is in essence a child to another? It's left vague and intentionally doesn't go into much detail, but when you think about it, aging is what we're all suffering from. The cycle of life and the inevitability of decay, like the same fate as the Albinaurics who bleed the same silver as this scholar, and who are themselves cursed to become broken with age and fade away. However, the scholar views this as a disease to be cured, and phrases his desire for immortality in a manipulative way to rally sympathy for his cause. This is why, despite being a scholar, his intelligence isn't very high. Instead, he is a master of the Arcane, of afflictions, studying the problem to understand it in search for the solution and cure. The solution he discovers is the wisdom of stone and the nature of the primordial life within, capable of existing in a vessel that doesn't age or decay. To me, this represents the cage of divinity, being frozen in place, bound eternally to an unending duty or state of being like the fire giant's eternal watch, Miquella's eternal nascence, or like the celestial bodies in the sky. But viewing such a state of existence, of eternity, without having experienced it, would look very appealing indeed to one fated to rot. Desperation and the fear of death can blind people to the potential of fates far worse, and all too often we see people and entities subjected to unimaginable suffering for the sake of another's attempt to cheat death. For example, how many people died to build the pyramids for their god kings, as a means to resurrect them in the afterlife, for their chance to survive beyond death? How many beastmen died to create the mausoleum of the Dragon Lord, where he slumbers beyond the reach of time and death? How many perished in the creation of any Ilim for the ascension of one? Or in the belly of Rykard for his own cultivation? And how many died in the primordial crucible for the sake of the birth of the golden tree? How many were fed to its roots to maintain its golden abundance? The decay of mortal vessels being the sickness afflicting the living and the unspeakable sacrifices undertaken in the pursuit of the cure is told in the forbidden rites of the ancient sorcerers, the astrologers, who would body hop through their knowledge of the wisdom of stone and perpetuate their will and mind beyond the shackles of mortal flesh through profane rite. Examining the process of primal glintstone transferal demonstrates the removal of one's primal glintstone, a replacement for a heart that one's soul is presumably anchored to. At its center it holds a fetus, much like a larval tear, making this whole process seem an awful lot like some form of profane birthing ritual. And that's given credence in the concept of compatibility, which we will speak on in a moment. This parasitic existence is like that of Voldemort and his Horcruxes, puppets within which he seals a part of his own soul, puppets even like living beings such as serpents, and even people, like Professor Quirrell, a compatible vessel hosting another life form to perpetuate it, or allow their body to be hosted by another being as a request or as the result of a process, like the fell god within the fire giants, and even more directly, like the face on the back of the lamenter revealing the truth of their pursuits and for whom their efforts were for. Exactly like the mask covering the face of the darkness skin of the scholar, which is in likeness to the face on the back, the puppet and the puppet master. And like this manipulative scholar whose Night Invader bears the title of Deceiver. In all of Elden Ring there is no puppeteer more befitting of the title of Deceiver than Seluvis, who himself hides a trove of puppet vessels in a sickening lair beneath the ruins, near his rise. However, this secret is merely one of his many, and what I and many others believe to be his greatest secret is that Seluvis himself is a puppet. His outfit is a tremendously interesting piece, a cluster of the cosmos and serpents, with an assortment of Gloam stars dotted across a celestial blue scape. On the top side of this astrological marvel is a double circle, like that of the Two Fingers, and the 8-pointed motif we see in numerous cultures in Elden Ring, but comprised entirely of intertwined serpents. However, most importantly, in line with the theme of what the mask represents, the mouth sealed by golden shooting stars reminds me of the curse of the Albinauric frogman, who Thop explains, a curse to silence, and the mouth behind this sealing golden crosshatch is gaping, almost exactly like the older male Albinaurics, those who are fated to fade away. And just down from Seluvis's rise, hidden in the mountainside above the Carrion Chapel, is a character protected by mechanics reserved for only the most important NPCs, a privilege that not even Seluvis himself holds. The Puppet Master, the Pitiable Pitia. He is a Carrion servant, one of the embittered Albinaurics who curse all life, and who I believe is truly Seluvis. He has all of the things Seluvis covets most. For example, when he's killed by his puppets after his control of them is severed, he drops either Dolores the Sleeping Arrow puppet, or if we've completed Seluvis's delivery task, he drops the Nephelilu puppet instead. What's more, Pitia even holds the map to the object Seluvis covets most, the Amber Starlight Shard that would allow him to make a puppet of an Empyrean. And finally, when his control of his puppets is severed, resulting in their betrayal, it results in Seluvis falling limp, like a puppet whose strings had been severed. So if Seluvis himself is just a puppet, then these bodies are more than likely here for more than just his personal entertainment, and like Gowry and the Pests, are tools with which he can body hop to and achieve his goals. Body hopping is, after all, something we have seen firsthand, multiple times. The bodies we see in the dungeon include a Selen-like vessel, a profane perfuming omen killer, a Jarman, a Noxian monk, a maiden, and Dolores, who was the love interest of Gideon and Seluvis, and if you complete the quest, Nephelilu, or whoever you feed the potion. This dungeon of depravity is at first glance a chamber of degeneracy, but I think that these puppets have been specially selected because of their characteristics, makeup, and knowledge. Pitia, who wears the same headband as Scholar's remembrance skin, representing the dregs of the Golden Order, worn by the wandering nobles of the royal capital and adorning the jars containing the dregs of divinity, shares the same ill-begotten fate as the Scholar, that of his own senescence of his mortal shackles, the so-called aging curse of the Albinaurics. And I believe Pitia, like the Scholar, is after a complete escape from this fate, from the prison of decay. His entire gambit is to enslave Rani and make for himself the perfect puppet, the perfect vessel, one that doesn't age, decay, or die, the very frame Rani herself abandoned her own divine flesh for. While at first one would assume his pure elation would be due to the perverse things he would do with said puppet, and there's a lot of truth to that we'll note on soon enough, I would wager his true elation would be procuring a vessel which could help him escape his prison. And curse. I think the evidence is in the blood. As I explored in my previous longform, every Albinauric bleeds silver, with exception to those who have stature and power far beyond their kin, and whose existence as Albinaurics is so obscured by their transformation and mounts that it's resigned to mere rumour. A transformation they may owe to blessings they received from their respective allegiances. We also see this in the Silver Tears, who bleed silver blood, until they take on the form of another being and evolve or ascend, transforming into them, blood and all. And this mimicry, this attempted transformation to become something better or stronger, and escape the prison of one's form, is also reflected in Pitia, who, unlike every other Albinauric of his kind who bleeds silver, bleeds red when he dies. I think the fact he only bleeds red blood is evidence of his attempt to undergo a physical transformation, as this represents the reddening that occurs in the alchemical great work before the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, otherwise known as the Elixir of Immortality. I think this is a result of him successfully purifying himself to a degree, and bringing out the innate arcaneness of the artificially created Albinaurics, the secret of their people. This is why, while they do all bleed silver, it's only when you critically injure them and strike their very core that the secret truth of their innate arcaneness is revealed. I think his effort to purify himself of blood that was viewed as impure and achieve the reddening of his being was achieved through his selection of puppets, as they're each necessary ingredients for attempting to escape the fate of one's mortal bonds, the curse of his composition and birthright. The perfumer-like male Nox from the eternal city of the Albinaurics, who bleeds red blood despite being a denizen of the cities of artificial silver life, and the profane perfumer turned slayer of omens both represent toxicology, alchemy in relation to the effects of impurities or alloys, and the medicinal properties of these reactions. in both an organic and inorganic regard, using one to achieve a result in the other. The harmonious melding of flesh and stone, which is the truth behind the wisdom of stone. The introduction of doses of death to heal or strengthen life, and the introduction of life to inorganic alloys are both two sides of the same coin, aimed at the focus of strengthening the vessel. You are what you eat, and mind over matter. Toxicology is the field of medicine that was born from the alchemist Paracelsus, and it is the very essence of looking for a cure in the sickness, looking for the solution in the problem, exactly as the arcane scholar does. This practice of distillation is the very heart of regression, which is the core of the Golden Order Principia, found on the corpse of this esteemed perfumer in the heart of the Erdtree Sanctuary, which I explore in this video here, in comparison to the out-of-place Nox statue in the Chapel of Anticipation. This obscured and venerated corpse, suspended on a throne like the venerated figures of the Eternal Cities, holds the very incantation of the would-be god and scholar Radagon, who sought answers in both knowledge and the sword, to make himself whole. And it's with this knowledge that can be used to create medicine that one can also attack and create poisons, or ambrosias to veil the senses and commit the soul to the sacred duty or necessary mission, with brutality so fierce it gives omen nightmares. Like the potentates or the inquisitive scholars of the Academy and their experiments involving the same jars, these living crucibles of divine dregs. And that's where the Sellen clone, the Maiden, and Dolores come in. The womb as a biological hermetically sealed vessel and crucible is a theme positively shouted throughout the game, and I have plenty of videos you can see that explore this topic. For example, Meta, who resides in the birthing chambers and birthed the Two Fingers, whose icon shows them nursing a literal seed of the Erdtree, and who rest above the divine towers with great runes between them, looking an awful lot like the lower half of the womb-clutching demi-human queens. The Brood Mothers, like Fia, who herself rebirths Godwyn in the form of a great rune, and who refers to this rune as her child. The amber egg given to the Lunar Queen by Radagon is a divine womb in and of itself, encasing the great rune of the unborn, allowing her to perform a profane rebirth ritual, presumably attempting to grant it new life, as Fia did for Godwyn, a new vessel for her daughter who discarded her body and great rune. We can even see the unborn scions in the womb before they're birthed, just like the clutching womb of the Jarman, which is strewn with body parts and bears the same amber hues as the egg. Saintly divine dregs that meld harmoniously, and for that purpose, their composition as a biological crucible for an alchemist to create great works within, in addition to their inherent divinity, nobility, or lineage, they were selected for the lewd purposes you already imagined. Sellen is presumably Carrion royalty, and if this vessel is compatible with her, then it may well also be Carrion royalty. Perhaps one of the once numerous and now mysteriously missing Carrion princesses, for example. The Maiden's vessel is a vassal of the greater will, granted the knowledge of ability to turn runes into power. And Nefeli Lu is another example of this concept, in that she has royal blood and is herself also capable of being a biological crucible possessing a womb, which in an alchemical sense is a hermetically sealed vessel to distill one's genes, but with the added benefit of combining your flawed genes with noble or divine genes. To create royal or divine offspring that's more compatible with you. And there's that word again. Compatible. For argument's sake, your vessel is insufficient and decaying, but you lucked out and married into divinity, and have a divine wife and are in a divine family, but are yourself not technically divine. Or rather, technically divine, but not literally. You can't take over your wife's vessel because first, she's a god, and second, your soul itself isn't divine and would be rejected. Like Sellen and the Graven Mass, you can't just dive in, you could end up lost in a sea of consciousnesses. There are steps to be taken for compatibility, like suppression drugs for organ transplantations to prevent rejection, like the progressively more stone forms of the headmasters of the Academy. That's why when it comes to a new vessel, the key word is compatible. And what's more compatible than one's own flesh and blood? Now, say you had children with this divine wife, they would be 50% divine and 50% mortal, or perhaps more divine, assuming mortal is recessive. Now you have a better chance of a snug fit for your primal glintstone. Now you have a vessel more susceptible to your advances as a figure of trust in their life, and with a genetic makeup that can better accommodate you, a compatible vessel. From that point on, it's about the repetition of the process for a progressively more divine result, breeding out the mortal genes in favor of the divine ones, removing the alloys from the gold in an ordered manner, keeping it in the family, keeping it pure, as some may say, an incestuous Ouroboros using divine twins, a male to transfer your consciousness to, and a female to continue the process. I think that's why Dolores was present, as it's made clear in her item descriptions that she was by some manner both masculine and feminine. If she were a hermaphrodite, or even if her composition was such that a female vessel was hosting a male spirit or tendencies, even that would be reason enough to be used in this process, to assist with the compatibility of the process overall and prevent rejections based on sex, as is the case with this twincest body hopping. This is why I think the scene with Chloe is far darker than people realize, and why her existence as a vengeful revenant with a special ability to birth rancorous spirits for the purpose of revival and familial power is genuinely really messed up. We've seen for ourselves the results of using women and wombs as biological crucibles, capable of even creating great runes, and the importance of their role as deathbed companions in ancient sacred sacrificial rites. We get an idea of how consensual this arrangement is through Fia's dialogue. And I believe this profane, defiling rite is what is being shown to us in Chloe's story. The prisoner is a starter class that boasts both skill with piercing weapons and an interest in the scholarly arts with the most basic of staffs and carrion magic. He starts with a rift shield in likeness of the very lightless void of the greater will, which is much like the form of grace, a memory of which he also starts with. Their character selection reads, a prisoner bound in an iron mask, studied in glintstone sorcery, having lived among the elite prior to sentencing, once an elite at the top of society, and who now exists as a dreg as a result of them committing an appalling crime, their clothing emphasizing how truly filthy they are and the depth of their intended punishment. Iron mask forced on a prisoner convicted of an appalling crime, thick, heavy, and utterly stifling. A foul creation designed to torment the wearer, either slowly fermenting hatred within their heart or a spiritual fervor that is near indistinguishable from it. A fervor like the official artwork of the prisoner on a rampage in the Carrion Manor massacring a Carrion knight. Unnervingly like this scene we see with this well-dressed home invader, who commits an appalling crime in a mansion whose design echoes the Carrion Manor. The skipping of the passage of time after she's hit and before she dies seems to be like an out-of-body experience, like a trauma response, and the blood on her hands suggests a struggle we don't see, until this vile scene culminating in a bloody climax. And if you pay attention to the noises, they're menacing, diabolical, suggestive, and positively bestial, exactly like the family communion birthing ascension ritual I've proposed. The eureka of a maddened arcane scholar. Finally, the strings of blood coming down her arm towards her hand appear like the strands of grace we see in the endgame, representing the Nightfarers free of their duty and form. Just like the Nightfarer's freedom, this represents her soul exiting her vessel and taking refuge within Daphne, escaping her defiled mortal bonds. Like an inverted version of Moog within Miquella's defiled corpse, with which he attempted many times to share his bloody bedchamber. Demonstrating this same effect when he exits Miquella's body, a compelling comparison between predator and prey, and the analogy of the foul act we witness. I believe this is represented in her resurrection as a revenant, a sacrificial bride decorated in flowers of blue, like the hood of the sacrificial maiden of Dominula, the bottom of her feet stained red, like Marika's, as she climbs the staircase to her ascension after raiding the baby diaper, pulling from the remains of the defiled carcass of the Ascension Rebirth ritual. Strands of memories. Just like the strands of precious memories the Revenant takes with her when she ascends the mortal plane. memories of grace, along with which she, and not the beast that defiled her, ascended. Both babies and women are used as tools for rebirth and cheating the cycle time and time again. Used as instruments for fetishes, offered up as prayers, and used as tools to prolong life and cheat death, as well as gain power. Just like Revenant's ultimate, which not only revives her teammates, but grants her family power. Just like I mentioned with fear and consent earlier, we can also see how consensual this situation was with Miquella. FromSoft are extremely specific with the way they position things in their cutscenes especially, and that's why it's important to examine the position of Miquella's arm breaching the cocoon. At first glance one might think he broke free himself. However, if you take a moment to consider the way this arm is pointing, the way it falls, and the circumstances under which he was abducted, it's obvious. This arm was ripped from the cocoon and is horribly broken. And sure enough, if we remove the cocoon and have a good look at the position of the arm, it's most certainly broken. And given the topic at hand, in a hideous manner and position, twisted in an unnatural way and snapped backward, which can be seen in the way it falls. All of this for the dreams of a madman luminary who wished to revive an ancient dynasty and grow it from the corpse of his defiled child victim. This is why we see the same figure time and time again across multiple cultures and ages, and why the soul-transferring twin glintstone headmasters of Raya Lucaria have the same apron as the little girl statues we find all throughout Carrion-related locations, and why serpents are ancient deities and subjects of sacrificial birthing rituals, as they have the ability to both shed their skin to escape disease and death, as well as act as a living biological crucible, as displayed on the ornaments and buildings in Enir Ilim, and of course Rykard, and as shown by the uncanny likeness of the striking snatch of the Jar Shaman's womb, and the strike of the living crucible's serpent Rykard, confirmed very neatly in the combination of these motifs in the Virgin Abductor. This is why the Ouroboros and twin symbolism permeates the entire game, especially in sacred rites and ascension rituals. The twin cuts that purify, because it's by this process that one can become pure, through the communion of family, the twins and the mother. Family is the crucible of the heretical sorcerer, and his journey in the conquest over death. Necromancer Garrus and the family heads comprised of 2 twin children and their mother, his family, which he uses to manipulate death and spirits, as well as control his pet snake crucible. Or Renala, who's trying to use her twin children to create a pure vessel for her daughter, and who otherwise uses these twins as literal weapons and divine protection, with their song forming her shield, 1 male and 1 female, to normalize the crucible current, motherly blue-silver to bring order to the fatherly red gold, distilling the impurities and collating the dregs of divinity within the detritus, like purple morning glory supporting a sunflower, like the sunflower that's the avatar of this divine tree, who has what looks to be star clusters in its face, like the gold mask of the enlightened gold mask, and the king of the dregs who holds within his face the same meteoric star clusters, like the Pleiades turned pillars of creation trapped in his skybox. The divinity literally trapped in the dregs, the divinity that rises from the crucible of sin. The only 2 times the word dregs is used in Elden Ring is used when describing the scion dregs of the Golden Host, the remnants of their noble golden lineage within the crucible, and the innards of Alexander, the essence of the living jars, crucibles of the shaman, the crucible of the maiden. I think this is a good reason why Shaman Village is so potently compared to Jarburg and their respective stories, and the jar that represents the main character of this story is Jarman, a child jar that is the only one who has gold within its cracks. Like the jars of Raya Lucaria used to experiment with the essence of life. The very kingdom of magic whose queen practices a profane birthing rite and whose children are all in close proximity to ancient serpentine children of a bygone Empyrean queen. The very kingdom of magic which Celovus's chair is set facing. And this brings us to the final body in this dungeon, the most profound one of them all, the Jarman. He is in essence trying to become like the jar, a vessel to hold the power of divinity within it, uncrumbling and unyielding. His form is that of a man with his head literally in this jar containing the dregs of divinity, searching for strength in what is referred to as an act of prayer. This is the bug collecting the gold within the excrement, which is the same gold within the lightning, and the same gold that's the foundations of the Golden Order. The very reason why that while fear can gestate a great rune, so too can the Dung-Eater gestate a great rune, making this rune a butt baby. Anyway, this is why the same mark of the beast that shows on Chloe's body, who represents the divine sacrificial maiden, defiled by the family communion of the beast and betrayal of her own, is the same mark found on what usually represents the collected dregs of divinity, in mimicry of a golden seed of the golden tree and the truth of their origin, on the icon which represents what is described as a formless power when it appears, behind which are literal dregs. This is the very same mark that's seen when combining the portions of the Elden Ring, the three-clawed omen of the beast, the mark of unholy communion that would pierce the heavens to devour the gods, the fiery ambition and arrogance of only man and serpents, the fire of ambition, an obsessive mound of flesh attempting to outsmart every form of annihilation, refusing to fade away as the fate of the Albinaurics would dictate, instead daring to attempt to harness the power of divinity within the dregs. The gold within the excrement, a mimicry comprised of the dregs of fallen divinity, howling a song of despair that demands the attention of the heavens, drawing them too into the detritus, like a hunter using the call of a child to lure its mother. The green beast devouring the stars to reach the sun, the alchemical green lion, that dissolves and devours, like the secret green of the devouring godskin's weaponry and the deathbed companion's jewels, the maidens who devour and rebirth, an appearance that hides a secret, like the familiar green eyes of the spirit tuner or Raya, whose eyes change from this to green after her serpentine transformation, like the piercing gaze of Messmer's twin serpent, and the eyes of the beast. A ritual fervour of blood and storms, sacrifice and communion, depravity and divinity, dancing around on all fours like the bestial fervour of the Pitia generation Albinaurics, eyes of the beast ripe with the hues of green envy, just like the aging Jarman. This is why the inversion of the Elden Ring formation I showed is the eye of the primordial beast, the lightless void, like the iron claw given to us by the beast clergyman living in penance of his divine sin. This is why I believe I see more than a likeness between Chloe's murderer and defiler, this mysterious male figure who is the missing link between her and her doting grandfather, and the arcane scholar, who would sacrifice everything in his mad fervour toward immortality, but who instead resolved to pass on his notes to his successors in the finale of his remembrance, accepting his fate, and the Jarman in Celivis's dungeon, poised in desperate prayer, a body youthfully defying the withering truth underneath, the visage of a desperate old man in prayer trying to become purified and noble, like the saintly warrior Jar. The theme of the arcane scholar, searching desperately in a frenzied pursuit of knowledge for answers to how he can conquer death, is truthfully the foundations of Elden Ring, and something we see time and time again. It's why the Blood Knight Unspark presents himself as a scholar and is a master of the arcane. It's why the prisoner with a thirst for magic knowledge and profane rites wields a piercing weapon favoured by warriors of blood. Why the mask of the scholarly preceptors raises arcane. Why the necromancer Garrus, draped in robes of red, sacrificed his own wife and children for power over death. Like the scholar in lifestyle and appearance Rogier is chasing the secrets of death and its affliction and origin. Why the staffs wielded by the first astrologers is a bloodletting weapon that looks like a tree branch like the fire priest's staff, Deathrite spear, or Inquisitor's blood tree. Why the luminary Merg is a scholar of blood and piercing communion. Why the scholar of medicine is also a scholar of death and poison, and the learned Gideon has so much blood on his hands it's rusted his very spine. It's why the more gruesome, matter-of-fact red glintstone is shunned and banished in favour of the more deceptive truth of the life within the crystals. Because the true origin of the practice and what they are really manipulating and using, and the truth of the knowledge ending up being profane, threatens the nobility of the elites and brings into question and doubt the origin of their power, royalty, or godhood. The roots are mired in madness because there is method in the madness, and the foundations of the frenzied gold is the hue of destined death. Gloam. This is the deception, the act, and gambit of the arcane scholar. madly obsessed by the seduction of eternity and the deceptive betrayal required to reach it. In his darkness, he is nothing more than a parasite existing in a liminal state that could hardly be called living, struggling desperately to escape his mortal fate, using his family and friends, piling their corpses like a crucible. A song of despair to pierce the heavens in a desperate and obsessed attempt to cheat annihilation. But should dawn break, he would be the man who conquered the stars and brought order to gold, who had communion with divinity and achieved an eternal vessel that could hold the powers of the Elden Ring in perpetuity, the final goal of the ancient scholars of the celestial bodies. The astrologer-sorcerers of old whose wills were greater than the limits of their flesh, and whose ambition, at great cost, burned as bright as the heavens. There is, after all, a method to the madness. It's only through the crazed pursuit of knowledge that one finds the nugget of truth, however ugly, and it's only through the insanity of daring to challenge the gods that one might gain the opportunity to eat them, and in doing so, make them one's family. The full detailed exploration of this character, of the bug who became a god, and how he did it, will be in my next long-form video, which will be released, hopefully, in about a week. But if there is a production hold-up, I'll release another 15 secrets first. This is my first video working with another person who will be taking all of the clips for the video. There's really so much more to say on this topic, so next video I'll show you the method behind the madness from which the Elden Ring itself was crafted, the sins of the first Starcaller, and the who and what behind the cage divinity. Make sure to activate the bell so you don't miss the release of this video. It'll have more of my secrets and discoveries in it than any video before. Thank you to my patrons and YouTube members, your support is as always appreciated beyond words. And in terms of special shoutouts, I'd like to make a particular mention of my friend Meta, who showed me not only the Gloam within Frenzy Flame, but also the face of the Jarman. Oh, and also, Happy New Year. There are treasures and secrets aplenty, ready to share.